Well, thanks for joining us on the Pull Up a Chair podcast on this episode. My name is Ryan Smallwood, and we are going to have a great conversation today. I've got some great guests with me. This is Jorge and David Jorge, and I'm so excited to have them. We're going to have a conversation about the gospel and immigration. And so let me remind you before we get into it, as always on the Pull Up a Chair podcast, we may not always think alike, but we can always love alike. And so the things said here today may not reflect my views or the views of Aldersgate Church, but we've got to be open to the conversations. And so I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have today. So
are we.
Thanks so much for being with us. So obviously, if people are watching, it's easy to say that you're not American. And as soon as you begin to speak, people are going to go, oh, what's their dialect? What's their language?
Yeah.
And so
they might not notice something different.
So, man, I just want to say before you guys get into it, I thank you so much. I have learned so much from both of you. We've had some great conversations about immigration. I really appreciate your perspective and teaching me on that. And I think it's going to be valuable for everybody listening to this podcast. And so as we do that, I think the best place to start is just you're immigrants yourself from Cuba to the United States of America. So tell us a little bit about your immigration story. Maybe even, Jorge, if you can start with your calling to America and then maybe talk us through your immigration process, how that happened, how that worked, what your status is today, and then we'll go from there. Does that work?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. So that is very interesting. We came here as a family, not as a typical reason and motive that people come. So we came here because of God calling. So we have been,
You had a career in Cuba. So what was your career in Cuba?
Actually, 2 careers.
Yeah.
Yes, where I study medicine. I work as a doctor some years. And in the middle of that process, God called me to be a pastor. So I start from scratch. And all the step for be a pastor. So I worked as a pastor there for almost 20 years. And in the middle of a crossroad, when one of our stage will finish, finished with...
You were a district superintendent for a new district that was created specifically because of the work you had done in that specific province, and it was turned into a district for the Methodist Church. And then when that time ended, the allotted time for superintendent, then we need to find somewhere else to go.
Yes, and appeared this calling to come here and to work with Hispanic people.
Yeah. So how long ago was that?
About 7 years.
7 years ago. And you said family. So tell us a little bit about your family.
So I'm married with Giselle. We both met at university. So we both had our own career. We decided to leave them behind for the calling. In the process, we had 2 children. So David is 25 right now, and Annabelle is 23. So we try to do our best, trying to offer an evangelical way of life in our country, but had the very difficult times for us. So, but we were very united family. We all put together all our eggs in the same basket. We fight together. We keep together, so we thrive in that situation. So, thanks God.
So for anybody listening who may not be familiar with the climate in Cuba, the political climate in Cuba, give us a little background on the political climate in Cuba. It's actually, at the time we're recording this podcast and it's going to air, there's a lot of stuff happening with the political climate in Cuba. So kind of give us some backdrop on that and what's happening there.
Well, after the independence war, the last independence wars in Cuba, there was an American intervention that allowed for stabilization of the country and the appearance of a democratically elected government, which was more or less corrupt all the way until after the World War II and well into the 50s. There was a dictatorship by a guy named Fulgencio Batista who organized a coup and took control of the country. Had ties with all sorts of American gangsters. It's quite the story about a bunch of American gangsters, both during Prohibition and later on built a lot of the best buildings that still remain in Havana. The thing is, those dictators spent a lot of money in developing the nation, and the city of Havana thrived incredibly. But there were some social issues that were used by Fidel Castro to organize a stage of revolution, which little by little became communist after a couple of years, and just devolved until the socialist nations of the USSR collapsed in the 90s. A very dark age dawned upon us. I was born in the middle of all that. A lot of poverty, a lot of social issues, a bunch of them, and that have never been fully resolved. But in the middle of all that, the communist control of the island turned very strongly against minority groups, not racial minorities, but ideological minorities. Originally, the heaviest assaults were on gay people and religious people. And by religious people, I mean all of them. Yeah, you could be a Yoruba, an African.
Not just Christianity.
They don't
but any
care.
religion.
They go, since communism works more, it's more of a religion than an actual economic system because it comes with an imposed set of values. They cannot tolerate the existence of religion. And they've been cracking down on religion one way or another for the 62 years they've been there. And Cuba has an informal but still somewhat enforced atheism.
Yeah,
So religion is frowned upon.
absolutely.
Yeah. By
And-
state decree.
Yeah. So on the day we're recording this, we're in the middle of coup's not the word, but what's happening in Cuba right now? Tell us kind of what's happening there right now.
Well, after more repression, and government take control of everything, every single detail in the private life, in common daily private life in family in Cuba. They only had the opportunity to get money and support from the family outside of the country. So, but this seemed that never ends. So people outside decide to stop that, and the situation turned very, very
Dire.
hard. So
To that add with the coronavirus pandemic, that completely destroyed the tourism industry, and also that only left them with pretty much they have a medical slavery thing they do in which they send their own doctors to the worst places in the world, get paid a lot of money, and the doctors get like a 1% of that, and that's their only source of revenue. But the problem is that means there's no doctors in Cuba, and people started dying, not necessarily of coronavirus, but vitamin deficiency because lack of food, terrible hygienic conditions. There's images of hospitals with people just lying, pretty much patients on waiting rooms, just sleeping on the chairs and on the floors. And the last news we got from our old hometown, it was somewhere near 15 people a day were dying for just poor health conditions, while the government advertises a medical paradise over there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and now if you turn on the news, you see images of Cubans in the streets and protest and calls for freedom and so your immigration story, there was a calling behind it, but let's just talk about immigration in general. Is that, in your words, in your thoughts, is that the reason people, what are the reasons people are primarily wanting to leave their country to come, in this case, let's say to the United States, but why do people, and not just Cuba, but in general, I guess I should have said too, Jorge, you lead a Hispanic congregation here in the United States, and so first generation primarily, Hispanic and Latino people, so most of them are immigrating over. And so you, but from all over. I mean, South America, Central America, Cuba. You deal with a lot of people and immigration. So, kind of give us an idea on why people leave their countries to come to the United States.
So Cuba or
Any kind. I mean, well, it could be different. So,
Okay.
Cuba versus a Central American country or a South American country or whatever.
yes,
Yeah, there are different flavors depending on the country, but
I think that's interesting. I think that's important, though, David, because I think sometimes our mentality can be that people immigrate for that everyone immigrates for the same reason,
Oh,
or
no.
there's only one
Not at
reason.
all.
And so shine some light on the reasons behind immigration.
Well, most of the Hispanic people have very strong, developed cities and life. So there is like a high class in every of our countries. So not Cuba. Cuba is a different thing. But many people live there. They can arrive. They can come here or whatever they want. They don't have to deal with big issues. But as those cities grow, more problems you can see on the country, out of cities. So those people are mainly the people that want to come here. They was forgotten. They was forgotten about for governments. They have almost nothing to work for future family. There is no opportunity to thrive, and most of them don't have enough education either. So, and there is a very strong dynamic because they come here, most of them illegal. They want an opportunity, and at the beginning they come to United States thinking in work hard and to support their family there. But after that, the idea changed when they have first-hand experience about how people could be treated here. Most of them, even with any connection with the legal situation or even understand, even without language, they encourage people there to come, their family. Come, this is an opportunity. Imagine you live there with nothing, and here you can get maybe a car, maybe an apartment, a job. So that is heaven. So that is a very big amount of people under those situation. There is another situation with two other group of Hispanic people. One of them is Puerto Ricans. They have a legal status to come here.
they have a Commonwealth status.
With the United States.
Yes, that is another issue, completely different. And Cubans, they are fighting with a regime for 62 years. They are looking for freedom. Even with there are 3 generations indoctrinated about that freedom is what the Cuban government offered them there, and they try to demolish this capitalism ideal. People get sick of that. And even when some of them come here thinking that they're coming here because economic issue, when they realize what is capitalism, what is freedom, they surprised about that. So they have to be destroy these indoctrinations, and Cuban people here try to explain back to their family there what is freedom and all the tricky speech that they receive every week in the television. So that will develop this knowledge about what is freedom, and they're fighting for freedom. They say, okay, if we have the opportunity to live in a free country, we will get everything that we are expecting to get. or to obtain or to fight for.
Yeah, there's a difference between normal economic migration you tend to see from Central America and South America, although some of them are also escaping crime. That's the other common the other common cause for immigration. But the difference between Cuban immigrants and most other immigrants is that Cubans do not really want to emigrate. Given the chance, I will be willing to bet that if communism magically disappears from the island, about 90% of Cubans will go back in one way or another.
Yeah.
Like either keeping dual citizenship and living in both places at the same time kind of thing, or just going back completely.
I think I think it's safe to say that's true of refugees, true, correct? And refugees different from immigration in that a refugee is fleeing a threat to their own life.
Yes.
And most of them, well, am I true in saying most of them don't want to leave their country?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of an exile situation. That's how Cubans identify ourselves, as exiles or expats. But because in reality, that's why we can mobilize so quickly in a way. Like the city of Miami's been closed most of this week because of protests and demonstrations, because pretty much there's a single-mindedness to end whatever that's destroying our country and go back there and rebuild it.
And let me tell you this: immigration can have been weaponized for the Cuban dictatorship. Once they collect a lot of people that want to fight for freedom, they open the borders and they
Send them away.
They encourage people to go. If you want to be here, go to the United States.
Wow. So you're saying the government of Cuba actually does
Yeah,
that?
they did that in '84.
Have you seen the movie Scarface with Al Pacino?
Yeah.
Well, he was a Cuban exile, but he was a criminal because what happened historically is that Fidel Castro gathered. There were some protests in Havana, and he just said everyone can leave. But at the same time, he emptied all the prisons and all the mental asylums and sent everyone there as basically an act of aggression against the U.S. And Scarface is based on that.
Yeah.
They did that in '84, and they
94.
did that in '90s as well.
Wow.
And many people in Miami, in Cuba, is waiting for the third.
Do you think that's something that could happen right
they
now
will.
with the current political
They
climate?
they don't have any other options to
Wow.
get rid of those protesters.
Yeah. So then, from the United States perspective, that's a problem on our end, and that's where the whole the conflict between immigration or about immigration comes up. Why? Take me if you can, take us if you can, psychologically to why someone would enter the country illegally. What causes someone to do that versus going through the process of becoming a legal immigrant into the United States of America?
Well, I will say this based in my experience, because I'm working with a lot of them. So if we have a group of Hispanic people that come because they have been invited by Texas Tech, and people that have resources and they are educated people, they will follow legal things. But those people that come illegal, this very interesting thing, they don't realize about what legal thing is. They don't have any relationship with their government. They don't see law and structure, order in any way.
They've never seen it in their lives. I have a story. I have a friend from Cuba, and he calls me one day and he's like, "Hey, I jumped into a plane and now I'm in Guatemala. I'm just gonna go all the way up there." I'm like, "And are you gonna cross illegally?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm gonna do it legally." He's like, "That's not an option. You don't just sign. They don't give you like a piece of paper and you sign which one you want to cross." And because they just don't know that.
Yeah.
There's the reality they live in, and then there's the promised land, which America has advertised itself, and in many ways it is, but people don't really understand the legal system that allows for the promised land to exist until they actually are part of it.
Yeah. So a lot of it is really just ignorance. And what I mean by that is just a complete disknowledge of the immigration process.
Indeed.
Their action of life, the expectation, life, socialized way of life for them is only between families. They don't have any notion about government, and I fight a lot of that with them about this because I need to explain them what is a health care system, what is a police system, immigration. They even don't recognize one of other. They see uniform, they see. Oh, they are so scared to get into a big building with hospital.
It is normal outside of the U.S., especially in Latin America, for separation of powers not to exist. So when you see a police officer, that's no different from the legal system, and that's no different from the legislative or executive. There's just a law, and the law involves government and everybody.
Right.
More or less democratic, depending on the country, but most Hispanics don't really know what a legal system is. There's basically just some laws you follow and some guys in uniform that enforce it, and that's it.
And is it also fair to say? Is it also fair to say that then, in their experience, odds are the uniform implies some form of possible corruption as well, from their experience?
Many of them.
Depends on the country, the reality, but
And
it usually does.
Other a very strange issue because they don't have any relation with them. I tell you, they live in a mountain with maybe 45 families. They marry between them, so that it's incredible. Well, that easy than as this. If they see that here is a good opportunity for life, they don't think in any legal thing. Even if they come to the immigration tell them how to do things correctly in order that get the real opportunity for that. They never understand that. Not for the language and not for the idea. So most of the officers try to explain things. They all will say yes. Do you understand? Yes, but they are not understanding anything.
Well,
they are looking for get out of that situation in which they don't understand any single thing and try to be try to go in a place that they could see something that could be more close of their situation and history and culture.
Well, think about how many Americans, and this is an educated country, how many Americans can't place Argentina or Nigeria in a map? Imagine someone who's lived a rural life for like their entire life, down 8 generations, and the only thing they know is America is this, and this, like just 3 random things. Freedom, they don't even know what that means. They're just like, okay, you can make money. And but they don't really understand what's in between them and America. And once they're America, they don't understand what the system is.
Yeah.
A rule of law?
Yeah,
they
that
don't
doesn't
have
exist.
any idea about that.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that not only are those who are immigrating into the United States of America are ignorant about the process, would it be fair to say that most Americans are probably ignorant about this exact situation and why people are coming and the process with the problem with illegal immigration?
Oh, yes. So it's so hard to see the opportunity in which both sides could meet. So I'm looking for those experience here. You can see any place, any opportunity, any way in which these two group could meet in any way possible. They talk. They try to understand each other possible. No. So
both sides tend to have a policy of avoidance. So it's what you see. Immigrants will avoid participating in the culture as much as they can, maybe out of embarrassment or out of fear. And in the meantime, what I've seen is Americans tend to avoid as well, and for fear of being insensitive, which, in my opinion, is a huge mistake because, as we were saying before, in the age of information, indifference is the worst thing it could happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So take us to your personal story. What did y'all experience as? But disclaimer: legal immigration.
Yeah.
What did you experience in terms of legal immigration? Was there hostility from Americans? Was there what kind of things did y'all experience as you immigrated into the United States?
Not in our experience
No.
at all.
then
Positive.
again, our experience is very, very limited. It doesn't happen often. We had the privilege of just coming up here, and people were waiting for us, and they were super nice to us.
Oh, yeah.
They had everything ready for us. He had a job, like we were eased into it. Then again, we follow every single legal channel.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I'm going to say that's because you immigrated to West Texas. So see,
In all fairness, we haven't heard any stories like ours outside of Texas, too.
Yeah.
Just saying.
yeah. So now, if I can switch, because I know you have experience with other people, how are people who immigrate illegally usually? Not usually, I can't say that, but in your experience, how have you seen people that have immigrated illegally? What kind of attitude are they met with?
Well, it's very complicated because most of them don't speak English, don't understand culture. They had their own idea, and you can see a person that was very thankful for the treatment that they received, and others are disagree with the same treatment. So they had many different expectations about what is correct, what is not. As much of
People have attitudes.
people are
towards it.
humble, they're so grateful. So if there are people that heard many stories before they arrive here, so they will be very scared and they will see everything through those eyes. So it's a huge
That's a hard question to
spectrum.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, it all depends on the expectations that every immigrant has once they get
So
here.
statistic here won't
That
won't
won't help
work.
you.
Yeah.
won't work. Have to go case by case.
Yeah.
Yeah, immigration is a very individual problem.
So that's a good lead in, David. So let's talk about that in terms of how, because this is the struggle for Christians, for Christ followers. Well, what should the gospel response to illegal immigration be? Like, how do we? And boy, I just unloaded a
No
a big
pressure.
question there. No pressure on answering it, but how? 'Cause I think this is the real struggle for Christ followers: is how do we deal? So, legal immigration there's a law set up, there's a rule set up. You follow the process, you go through the system. Not that system's flawless or not broken, but in terms of addressing illegal immigration, I mean, you guys are telling us today most. Or in your experience, immigrants who come in illegally are probably ignorant about the law, the rule of law, the system. So what should a gospel answer to that be? How should we address immigrants who are coming into the country illegally? How do Christians deal with this?
Well, I have a theory myself. I don't know if you will agree with it, but I'd like to refrain back to it. Every time there's a Christian perspective issue, I try to go to whatever Jesus says. And I really like the parable of the oil lamps. And metaphorically speaking, the oil lamps will be the countries. The people immigrate because illegally they're willing to go through, I mean, God knows how many risks, and there's a lot, to come here to pursue a society that functions. But the reason why that society functions is because of the rule of law. And that's the oil. Oil other nations don't have. And the parable says, Jesus says, if you give your oil, then you will not have enough. You cannot. I have to understand that if you collapse a society, then there will be nowhere to go in the end, and it will end up affecting everyone. And an example I had, I'm trying to. I got married, and my wife's still in Cuba, and her process has been very delayed, and it's exceedingly complicated just because of how many illegal immigrations has occurred and how many people have cheated the system one way or another, and it just encumbers the system. So illegal immigration only hinders legal immigration in a way, and it's a common subject of speaking, like how some people might be waiting in line for 5 years in Syria where they could be killed any day, while thousands of people are just crossing the border. I mean, not to disregard them, because they will have the reasons, better or worst, but the reality is that you cannot punish those who follow the law in order to help those who are not.
Wow, that's really fascinating, David. Some of those who are waiting to immigrate legally, do they sometimes get to some point where they can see people immigrating illegally and go, well, why am I doing this? If this is going to take forever, does that drive them to immigrate illegally is what I'm trying to say.
I've been there at some points. I've really thought about it. Like, should I try to get my wife here for non-legal ways? And I mean, haven't done it. But
because you're not being rewarded for going through the legal process.
I am not, believe me. It's been a long time.
Right, exactly. But you see people who are not going through the legal process who are entering the country. Mm-hmm. And so I can see how that would be extremely frustrating.
Yeah, mildly disappointing. I mean, not to be insensitive, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's a reality. Whoever immigrates to the U.S. is an extremely long process and an extremely expensive one. And it's very hurtful to see some people bypass it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so I love the way you use the illustration of the lamps as well, and I think that's another thing we have to keep in mind is that the rule of law is so important, and the rule of law is designed to support the people that are here, and you flood that system. There are systems, the ignorance of systems, but the systems in the United States are broken and flawed, and so adding illegal immigration on the top of those systems that are already broken and flawed can drain the oil out of those lamps in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing, and staying with that analogy, it's for us Cubans, our perspective's always been just let us go back and rebuild everything, because that's the Cuban mentality. As I told you before, like 90% of Cubans will go back if they let them.
Yeah.
But most other countries, immigration from other countries is usually people who don't see how they can help in their nations, but not necessarily that they cannot. And the U.S. perspective has always been like, no, stay there and do what we've done here. And obviously, easier said than done, but that's how the analogy works. Like, it wasn't easy here. It took time, it took blood, it took suffering. It takes that in every place.
Yeah. Fascinating, insightful. You have anything to add to that, Jorge?
Yes, I think there is two things that we can do. One is, and based on the gospel, we have to talk to people. Mm-hmm. So we have to do this person by person, So even when the law give you a mainstream to go through that, so we are facing a non-rule of law problem. So, and there are people are putting a lot of things, in risk. So huge. So I'm sure that is not the government role. So I ask myself, who have the calling, the opportunity, and the connections, to do that, the sensibility, the opportunity to work person by person? We, the church.
Yeah.
So in other hands, there is another problem, because most of those people that come here have their church in their country. and we have churches here. But it's incredible how churches here and churches there, even when we follow the same Jesus, we are not connecting. So if churches there know that people want to come here, why don't talk to people here, to pastors here? There are many pastors that go to those countries, but they are not talking about immigration, nothing about that. It's only maybe build a house, try to make better life there, but this is like I don't know.
It can be
It's little bitty thing.
counterproductive because if you're not talking about immigration or about how you can do for your country while you're there, what people say is, "Oh, the Americans come and they have money, so there must be money in America."
Yeah.
And it can. No, I'm not saying it does, but it can send the wrong message.
But if church here talk to church there, even when we meet, working together, whatever, we need to expand, our talking about work together in this kind of very harmful issue for our people. So if we go there, talk to pastors, so call me if you have any situation of that, if you have any doubt, let me explain this. There are many things that church can does in this situation, and we are only expecting that all the responsibility be in government shoulders.
Yeah.
That is not fair.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And just to make sure I understand what you're saying, your perspective, you're a Cuban American, your perspective as a church leader is that most Christ followers tend to look to the government to solve the immigration problem rather than looking to the church to solve the immigration problem.
So let's the government does everything that they have to do, but that is not the point. The point is what we could do, everything. So we said God opened doors when there is no door at all. So what? Hello, come on, let's look for those inexistent doors.
Yeah.
Asking God, so He will provide a lot of door for work.
And I know that as the pastor of your congregation, I know you do that. You help people. You help them with English as a second language. You help them get to immigration attorneys to get the legal process straightened out. The point I'm making is you're saying this, but you don't just say it. You do it as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I'm witness of
so
that.
I spend more time trying to take care of those persons, make them be interested in where they are living, and make them possible to thrive.
Yeah, not just take care, but actually help them integrate to society, make them independent in a way, to break that barrier of avoidance, just to make it easier for immigrants to become a part of the society. Because when people say this is a country of immigrants, this is a country of people who created a culture. This country has a culture, and you have to be a part of it. Otherwise, you're an outsider. And I think it's a huge mistake to try to convince people not to adapt, not to become a perpetual outsider to the point that next generation they will have no connection with their children. It's in a way almost abusive.
Yeah, we were talking off the air, David. We were talking about that earlier in terms of learning English. Can you speak to that a little bit and your perspective on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people like to say, "Well, there's no official language in the U.S." And like, well, that doesn't concern you. The reality is that most people here speak English, and you're not more special than others. German immigrants learn English. And the thing is, you should not do it because you have to, but because that's your best shot at getting anywhere yourself. Most people speak English. The best thing you can do is you cannot make connections if you can't speak the language. So in a way, it's not, you're losing your culture. No, you're not. You're adding a new one. You're becoming more proficient. You're becoming a better person, a more desirable person for whatever you do. So telling people not to learn English, just to hold on to your language and never let go, is like, it's all also kind of an abuse to them. It's just stay there and don't ever improve. That, I think that's a terrible thing to do to a person, or to try to convince a person to do.
Yeah. Let's throw ethnicity out the window. I mean, even as Christ followers, just to stay in one place and never grow, and that's the worst thing we can. Unfortunately, that's
you're
what's
gonna rile
happening
up
in a lot of our churches. But.
Yeah, you're gonna rile up against the system or whatever, or society. That's a very popular one. Like, that's not gonna change. That's just you're just shouting at the sky for nothing to happen. There's a reality, and you must adapt to it. Telling people not to do that because that's unfair, like, that's just hindering people.
Yeah. So you're if you're preaching to Christ followers, you're saying, hey, quit expecting the government to fix the immigration problem. Get involved.
When was the last time the government actually fixed anything?
Yeah, and I started to go there a while ago, and I was like, oh, we don't want to get into the whole government issue. Or even in the United States of America, we don't want to get into the whole political issue with immigration, because that's we're missing the boat when we do that. I think what I hear you saying is love your neighbor means talk to someone.
Meet them.
Meet them. Yeah, get involved in their life.
And understand what is happening, what that person is facing. They have a lot of problems. It's not only a phase.
Yeah.
Thomas Aquinas defined love as wishing the good to the other.
Absolutely.
I have to say this. Most of those people come here, their high expectation is to take care of their people there. Mm-hmm. Once they see that they could have the opportunity to do something for people here, they love that. So they suffer a lot because they are treating as people that come here to take from, and they are not the kind of people. That is not the kind of way of life that they had there. So if you give them the opportunity to offer something, well, if they invite you to their home, they will give you everything. So, when one of my points is let them know how they could be a very strong force that make this country thrive. And they are getting so excited. They see that they could have a space here, and that they could be appreciated for that. They will give. They will offer everything.
Wow.
But there is a big gap between. So somebody have to reduce that gap and get the best of this.
Yeah, and I think it's time for Christ followers to quit expecting the government to stand in that gap, and to realize that the church is who's supposed to stand in that gap.
I think that the government count of that.
The government has to protect the border. That's what we elect them.
Yeah.
They have to protect the national sovereignty.
The government's responsible for the rule of law. Ultimately, every government, we may not agree with how every government does this, but every government's responsible for a rule of law that's supposedly supposed to protect the people. Again, we may disagree with how each government does that, but that's the government's responsibility.
Yeah, but outside of that purview, then that falls on us, the people, because we really, really don't want the government to take care of that as well.
Right.
Well, that is a reason, because the government give a very strong and open space to church. They don't want to do church work. So the point is, government is working. Is the church working?
Unfortunately, though, the government sometimes has to assume the responsibility of the work that the church has been called to do, and is not doing.
It's not.
And it brought me back to what y'all were talking about in Cuba earlier, in terms of not just Christianity, but any religion there, and how oftentimes here in America we take that for granted and forget the it's with freedom comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's the freedom that we've been given. We have a responsibility to reach out and love our neighbors and take care of those around us, and not expect another entity to do that.
Yeah, and that means getting involved in politics in one way or another, because politics is basically who gets what, when, where, and how. So I think it's a terrible thing for the church to say, oh, we don't get involved in politics, because you are, by choosing not to. And you're just opening space for people who think differently than you, and there's a reason why they think differently than you. So you think one way, and that just creates an imbalance. And I think refusing to participate, indifference, a policy of avoidance will always cause, at the best, unbalance, at worst, chaos.
Thanks for sharing that, David. You know, the whole point of this podcast, and not just today's episode, but the podcast in general, is to open up those conversations and to realize that it's time for us to stop standing across the line from one another and yelling accusations and telling people that they're wrong and they've got it wrong and our side's got it right, but to actually pull up a chair and start sitting down and having these conversations. And I think that's the beginning of how all this works. And so I'm really, really, really grateful to you two for being willing to sit here today and share in this conversation with us. It's been fascinating to me, and I think it's going to help so many people. So I'm glad that you're joining us. Before we wrap up, so tell us a little bit, just so people know where to find you. Vida Abundante. Tell us a little bit about Vida Abundante, where people can find you. I think people may want to follow up with you on this conversation, and so just tell us a little bit more about Vida Abundante, where people can find you, your website, Facebook, all that kind of good stuff.
Okay, well, Vida Abundante, we are meeting here in Aldersgate. You can see us or follow us in any media: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have our website. You can get any information from us there. Our very short history as well. You can connect me with my phone number, personal phone number, if you want, 806-319-3899. There you can Google the first Hispanic church that will
just
show you
Hispanic church in Lubbock, and we will show up.
Vida Abundante.
Yeah, Vida Abundante or Hispanic church in Lubbock. There, all of those words will pop you up our name.
You can also go to Aldersgate.online, and you can find the link there to the Vida Abundante website as well. But I offer that not just so people can find you, know more about you too, but also for anyone listening who wants to take that next step to get involved in the immigration problem and process. You can plug them in helping with ESL classes.
Oh, yes, of course.
There's always a need to transport people back and forth to the immigration attorneys, things like there's lots of ways people that can get involved and not just sit back and talk about this, but actually take a step of action in the immigration issue. And so I say that so that people can reach out to you and we can help get them plugged in that process.
Yes, you're right.
So, Jorge, David, thank you guys so much. Any last things you would share before we sign off?
I'm good.
Well, only one point for every Christian. So we can't allow that government has officers that have interviewed with one of each immigrant that tried to get into this country, legal or illegal, and we church don't do that. So if they are doing at least an interview, we have to go for a little talk with them as well.
That's good work. Hey, David, prayers for you and your wife, and
Thank
that
you.
the process, we can get through the process and get her here with you as quickly as possible.
Hopefully.
Certainly. And I would encourage anybody listening to join in on those prayers for you as well to do that. So, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your wisdom. Appreciate your time.
Our pleasure.
All right. Again, thanks for joining us on this episode of Pull Up Chair Podcast. Let me just remind you, you may not agree with everything that was said here today, and that's okay. We're just pulling up in a chair to have the conversation. Remember, though, we may not always think alike, but we can always love alike. Thanks. Until next episode.